Goals. A plethora of videos talking anything related to goals or goal setting inevitably pop up sometime around the New Year's, because New Year's resolutions. The time of the year where our lives will do a complete 180. We'll go from a procrastinator to a hyper-productivity master. Start working out, eat healthy, finally start that business venture that will generate multiple passive streams of income. If you made a New Year's resolution, how did that turn out for you? Well, clearly it's nowhere near the New Year's. I probably should have made this video closer to Christmas time, but just based on the search traffic for anything related to goals, this concept is very important in our societal vernacular. And if a person is able to set and maintain their goals, they're probably viewed as someone who is diligent, responsible, and successful. On the contrary, someone who is not able to accomplish their goals, not so much. In the context of language learning, I find that this is especially prevalent. How are you supposed to do something as time-consuming and difficult as language learning without some sort of accountability and structure? It would be really difficult to not have a goal in mind. And that's why I don't think that goals are a bad thing. But sometimes the goals that we set for ourselves are not really the most helpful. If anything, it'll demotivate us when we feel like we can't accomplish them. Perceived failure will definitely motivate me to stick it out and grind my way to fluency, right? No? Oh, okay. Here's an example that I'm sure most of us have thought about before. What did you do when you initially wanted to learn a language? Probably say that you wanted to be fluent. That's a goal. I've said that before. I even said that in my first video. And maybe you search the interwebs for articles or resources about how to learn insert language. And one of the first things that they probably said was, set a goal. But how does one really set goals? Since there's so many memes and videos about expectations versus realities of goal setting, clearly we're doing something wrong. If you've worked in a company before, you've probably heard the term SMART goals as the way to guarantee that you'll accomplish them because they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, as opposed to ambiguous, undistinguishable, unachievable, irrelevant, and not time-based, or I've done SMART goals before and it was pretty good, but I found that when trying to apply it to a less concrete situation, like language learning, for example, it doesn't work as well. Like, how do we make a SMART goal for fluency? Specific, I want to speak, read, and write fluently. Measurable, I can understand what I listen to and read to. I can say things. Attainable, with enough effort, I'm sure it's attainable. I've seen other people do it, so it has to be possible. Relevant. Well, I want to learn the language, so it's relevant to my aspirations. Time-based. I read online that according to the Foreign Service Institute, what even is the Foreign Service Institute? Chinese is a Category 5 language, so it would take approximately 2,200 hours to learn to fluency. Now, technically, that is a SMART goal. We answered all of the questions, but did that really help us break this massive goal of fluency into smaller and more attainable pieces? Not really. If anything, it made Chinese seem more impossible than before. So what can we do? Weren't SMART goals the answer to all of our problems? Let me tell you a story. A few years back, I was working at a company where my supervisor had way too much faith in my abilities as a competent scientist. Looking back, I had no idea what I was doing. One day, he showed me a problem and told me to figure it out. Being the overachiever that I am, I immediately drafted up a hypothesis, some preliminary experiments, and went over to him as if I completely cracked the case. He looked at it and was like, "You still didn't answer the question." He explained it to me, and my response was, "That's just preposterous." Not really, but preposterous is a very fun word to say. The goal was impossible, or rather seemingly impossible. He started breaking up this impossible goal into ones that were increasingly smaller and increasingly more manageable, into buckets. Apparently, this is a business term, but I did get that from my boss, so if I'm wrong, it's not my fault. Essentially, the bucket method breaks up large problems, questions, or goals into smaller, more manageable ones. Let's bring fluency back into the picture. Using the bucket method, fluency is at the top. The ultimate goal for many of us is being fluent. But again, what does fluency entail? Well, what about being able to listen to a native podcast, or read a novel, or speak about a variety of topics in your target language? Put it in a bucket. The ability to listen to a native podcast is still a pretty lofty goal though. So let's break it it up into more buckets. Let's start with the type of native podcast. Podcasts about life are easier to comprehend than ones with more specialized vocabulary like politics or finance. Let's break up the slice of life bucket even further. We can break up a native podcast into ones with a transcript and ones without. Start with ones that have a transcript. But a native podcast, even with a transcript, may still be too lofty of a goal. Bring in podcasts that are targeted to language learners with a transcript. But how do you read that podcast transcript? Learn the most common 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 words. We keep breaking up these challenging goals into easier to manage tasks that compound on each other and bring us to the ultimate goal. Now your motivation for learning can be compounded on each of your successes. You learned 500 words, goal complete. You could read a podcast transcript, goal complete. You could understand 10% of a podcast, goal complete. You could understand 100% of a podcast, goal complete. Each completed goal will help motivate you to keep going through those buckets until you reach your ultimate goal. And you can do this with all the different buckets that we made earlier. You can even go even further and make even more buckets. It's up to you how many or few buckets you want. I personally use this method to stay motivated and keep track of my progress, since it gives me a great roadmap. It tells me where I need to go and shows me how far I've come. My own bucket goals are really extensive, so I won't be going through that in this video, but if you guys are interested, I can make another video going through all of my buckets. I hope this discussion of goals will help all of you make and accomplish your own. But even if you can't, that's all right. Language learning is a process with many waves. Sometimes we're more productive, sometimes we're less, but regardless, we're still making progress towards that elusive competency in our target language. What are some of your goals? Is it fluency or being able to have a conversation or reading a novel in your target language? Let me know in the comments below. And tune in next Sunday where I will convince you not to learn Chinese, or any language for that matter, because it's the hardest language in the world. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your days. Bye-bye.